She was just a girl with scraped-up shoes and a dream in her pocket. Buy a gift that might make her mom smile for the first time in months. But the moment she handed over her crumpled savings, the boutique doors opened, and in walked Rachel Zegler. What happened next? It wasn't a selfie or a sweet celebrity moment. It was a shattering confrontation with a past long buried, and a decision that would leave reputations trembling. Who really gets to rewrite the ending of a forgotten story? Lily had never set foot in a place like Marigold Lane before. The boutique glowed from within like something out of a fairy tale, its gold-plated door handles catching the morning sun and throwing reflections across the sidewalk like scattered stars. From the outside, it didn't look like the kind of place where people like her belonged. Her secondhand shoes barely holding together, and her winter coat missing 2 buttons. But Lily wasn't there to belong. She was there to buy a music box. Not just any music box, but the music box. An antique, hand-painted carousel of porcelain horses that danced to Clair de Lune and sat behind a glass display Lily had stared at through the window every week for nearly a year. It cost more than she'd ever spent on anything, but she'd saved every cent she could from tutoring kids, walking dogs, and cleaning out neighbors' garages. Her mother's birthday was only 4 days away, and though the woman had never asked for anything, Lily had watched her pause at the boutique window last spring, her face softening in a rare moment of nostalgia. "Your grandma used to have one like that," she had whispered. "Lost it in the move. But that's life. We let go." Lily hadn't let go. She'd held on to the idea like a lifeline. Her mom worked 2 jobs, came home late smelling of bleach and burnt coffee, and still made time to listen to Lily's stories or braid her hair. There had to be something the world could give back to her. Lily had decided that if no one else would do it, she would. Her entrance to the boutique was quiet, almost reverent. The warmth inside was immediate and surreal, soft music, polished wood floors, and the scent of lavender and old paper. She hesitated just inside the door, afraid to leave scuff marks, but the clerk at the register looked up and gave a small nod. He was an older man with silver-rimmed glasses and a bow tie, the kind of person you'd expect to see in a storybook shopkeeper's role. He said nothing, just watched as Lily approached the glass case and placed her small cloth coin pouch on the counter. "I've come to buy the carousel box," she said, her voice barely louder than the music playing. "I have enough." She began counting the coins, bills, and crumpled fives she'd been hiding inside her schoolbooks and in her sock drawer. It wasn't elegant, but it was honest, and she recited every amount with pride. The clerk looked on with an unreadable expression, then gently pushed a tissue box toward her as she sniffled from nerves. Outside, the boutique's world buzzed with excitement. A black SUV had pulled up, tinted windows hiding its passengers. Lily noticed none of this. She only saw the clerk reaching beneath the counter, gently retrieving the box as if it were an ancient relic. "This has waited a long time," he said cryptically. "Perhaps longer than you know." Just as Lily was about to ask what he meant, the bell above the boutique door jingled, delicate, like a note struck on crystal. Lily turned and froze. In walked Rachel Zegler. She wasn't flanked by publicists or security, just one assistant a few steps behind. Her face fresh but serious, eyes scanning the room like she wasn't looking for jewelry but for answers. She didn't glance at Lily. Not at first. Her gaze was locked on something else, the music box. The clerk stiffened. The room shifted. And for a moment, Lily felt like she had stepped into a story that wasn't hers anymore. But it was hers. She just didn't know why. Lily's world had quietly become a fortress of secrets, each one stacked like bricks in a wall to protect her mother from worry. What started as a simple idea, to buy a gift, had morphed into a months-long operation of strategy, sacrifice, and grit far beyond her 12 years. She had started small, babysitting a neighbor's toddler for $10 every Saturday afternoon. Then came the dog-walking circuit, 3 mutts that dragged her around the block in opposite directions but earned her $15 a week. From there, she added leaf raking, garage sweeping, and eventually took on tutoring 2 younger kids who struggled with fractions, charging only $5 a session because their mom had mouths to feed too. She skipped buying lunch at school and quietly refused ice cream outings with classmates. Instead of protesting, she'd smile and say, "I'm saving up for something special," leaving out the fact that special didn't include herself. She'd patch her socks instead of buying new ones and collect plastic bottles around the neighborhood to trade for coin refunds, always careful to wash them first. Her backpack grew heavier with coins than textbooks, and the little aches in her back or hunger cramps in her belly became constants she learned to ignore. At night, when her mom checked on her, Lily would fake being asleep, one eye barely open as her mother kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're my heart, baby girl." Lily never told her that sometimes that whisper made her cry silently into her pillow because she was afraid she might not live up to that kind of love. At school, she still got straight A's, but teachers noticed she seemed distracted. Her notebooks were full of doodles of music boxes, carousel horses, and one recurring image of her mom smiling, something that hadn't happened much lately. Her best friend, Kayla, asked if something was wrong, but Lily just laughed it off and changed the subject. Even when Kayla caught her skipping lunch again and offered half her sandwich, Lily would pretend she wasn't hungry. The weight of her mission was something she had chosen, and she carried it with silent pride. It wasn't until Mr. Dalton, the elderly clerk at Marigold Lane, began noticing her lingering outside the store window that her invisible labor started to gain an unexpected witness. He never said anything those first few weeks, only watched as she pressed her nose against the glass and stared at the music box like it was her North Star. But one rainy afternoon, as Lily stood outside soaking wet and still smiling at the display, he stepped out with a small cup of cocoa and offered it without a word. She took it with trembling hands, muttering a shy "thank you," before retreating back into the storm. From then on, Mr. Dalton began keeping quiet tabs on her. He noticed her uniform growing looser, her shoes becoming more worn. Once, he caught her quietly counting change on the sidewalk, checking a crumpled notebook where she kept her savings tracker. He never pried, but when she stepped inside the store to ask about the music box's price one day, he didn't brush her off like a child. Instead, he crouched to her level and said gently, "That one's not for just anybody. It waits for the right person." Lily took it as encouragement, unaware of the deeper layers behind his words. She had no idea that Mr. Dalton had been working at Marigold Lane for over 3 decades, long enough to recognize faces, patterns, and echoes from the past. He thought Lily looked familiar, not just in features, but in essence, a quiet resilience he hadn't seen in years. He kept this to himself, watching her return week after week like clockwork, always with a few more coins, always with more determination. At home, her mother was none the wiser. Maria, a woman hardened by years of hardship, had learned to mask her exhaustion behind a brave face. She worked at a diner in the mornings and cleaned offices at night, sometimes coming home with bruised fingers and a limp in her step. Yet she always asked about Lily's day first. "School okay? Anybody giving you a hard time?" And Lily always smiled. "Nope, just the usual." She never mentioned the blisters from pulling weeds for neighbors, or how she once twisted her ankle hauling recycling bags across town. She didn't say anything when she had to quietly tape together her broken glasses, or mend her backpack strap with fishing line she found in a junk drawer. This was her gift, one her mother would never see coming, and that made it worth every scrape. What she didn't realize was that while she worked in silence, the walls around her story were beginning to tremble. Mr. Dalton started asking the boutique owner questions about the box's origins. He recalled an old photo from decades ago that had once hung in the back office, one with a woman holding that very carousel, her smile unmistakable. He wondered if there was more to this girl's story than met the eye. He didn't mention any of this to Lily, but he began polishing the music box more often, as if preparing it for something sacred. Meanwhile, Lily's savings finally began to cross the threshold she needed. She'd counted the coins so many times she knew the amounts by heart. All that remained was the courage to walk in and make the purchase. A moment that seemed impossibly distant when she first began but now hovered just ahead, close enough to taste. She had no idea her journey had already become visible to others. And she certainly didn't know it was about to intersect with someone whose arrival would crack her entire world wide open. The room fell into a silence so thick it seemed to absorb the soft chimes of the doorbell behind Rachel Zegler as she stepped inside, her presence cutting through the cozy ambience of the boutique like a knife through silk. Lily blinked, unsure if she was hallucinating, because standing just feet away from her was someone she'd only ever seen in movie trailers and magazine racks. Rachel's features were even more striking in person. Sharp, expressive eyes, and a kind of magnetism that made you feel like you were looking at someone pulled out of a different world. She wasn't dressed like a celebrity. No glitter, no entourage beyond one woman with a discreet headset. But still, everything about her shimmered with a kind of quiet authority. Her gaze swept over the boutique, lingering briefly on the vintage jewelry case, the velvet handbags, then halting, without warning, on Lily. But it wasn't Lily's face she was staring at. It was what she held in her hands. The music box. Rachel's expression faltered, just for a second, and that second held an entire storm. Her assistant leaned in and whispered something, likely about a schedule, but Rachel didn't respond. Instead, she took one step closer to the counter, her voice soft but unwavering. "Where did you get that?" Lily, startled and unsure if Rachel was talking to her, clutched the box instinctively, like someone might rip it away. I'm buying it," she said, voice trembling but firm. "I saved for it." Rachel blinked as though waking up, then offered a quick smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. Sorry. It just looks familiar." Mr. Dalton, who had stood motionless behind the counter, now moved slowly, almost ceremonially, as if managing the tension in the room with practiced precision. "This piece has a way of stirring memories," he said cryptically. "It's been in this shop longer than most of our inventory. Some say it carries a story." Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly. A story? Lily looked between them, heart pounding. She didn't want drama. She just wanted to give her mom a beautiful moment. But something in Rachel's voice made her curiosity stir. Rachel stepped forward, looking at the music box more closely now, her fingers twitching as if they longed to touch it but didn't dare. "Did someone bring it in?" she asked Mr. Dalton. "Or has it always been here?" Dalton hesitated for the briefest moment. "Let's just say it found its way here. Sometimes, things do." The air in the boutique shifted, charged with something invisible but real. Lily felt it, a buzz in her skin like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Rachel, still staring at the box, finally let out a quiet sigh and said, almost to herself, "My grandmother had one just like this." The words hung there, unclaimed, and something in Lily's brain flickered. Her own mother had said nearly the same thing, hadn't she? About her own mother? Before she could ask, Rachel finally looked Lily in the eye. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. It's just uncanny. That music box. It's identical to one I saw in an old photograph. It belonged to my great-aunt, I think. She lived in this area for a while before she moved to the West Coast." Mr. Dalton's expression didn't change, but there was a glint of something behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe even worry. "That's very possible," he said. "Many of our items come from estate collections. Sometimes they circle back when they're ready." Rachel tilted her head slightly, clearly intrigued. "May I?" she asked Lily, pointing to the box. Lily hesitated. It wasn't that she didn't trust her. It was that this felt too important, too fragile, like handing over a piece of her soul. Still, she nodded, and Rachel carefully lifted the music box, turning the crank gently. The soft, ethereal melody of Clair de Lune spilled into the shop, wrapping them all in a sound so beautiful it seemed to erase the lines between generations. Rachel looked mesmerized, but then, almost imperceptibly, her expression shifted from wonder to something more complex. Grief, nostalgia, confusion. "This song," she murmured. "My father used to hum it when I was little. I never knew where he got it from." Lily felt a strange pressure building in her chest. "My mom said her mom had one just like it, but she lost it when they had to move." Rachel looked up sharply. "What was your grandmother's name?" Lily paused. "Angela Vargas." Mr. Dalton inhaled softly, and the assistant, who had been silent until now, looked visibly startled. Rachel, for a moment, looked like someone had knocked the air out of her. "Vargas?" she repeated. "Angela Vargas?" Her voice cracked just slightly. "That's impossible. That's my great-aunt's name." The room swayed. Or maybe it was just Lily, overwhelmed by the sudden unraveling of a thread she hadn't even known was part of her story. "Wait, what?" she whispered. "You're saying—" Rachel stepped back, visibly shaken. I don't know what I'm saying," she admitted. "It could be a coincidence. Vargas is a common name. But the box, the music, the neighborhood, it's too much." Her assistant pulled her gently aside, murmuring something urgent, but Rachel waved her off. "No," she said. "Not yet. I need to understand." She turned to Mr. Dalton. "Where did you get this box?" The clerk, hands folded, looked at them both. "It was donated," he said. "Years ago. No paperwork. Just an item left at the door. But if what I'm hearing is true, then maybe it was meant to come back. To one of you." Rachel sat down on the small love seat near the register, her hands trembling. "She disappeared, you know," she said suddenly. "My great-aunt left the family when I was young. No explanation. We always thought she didn't want to be found." Lily's voice barely rose above a whisper. "My mom said the same thing, that her mom vanished, left a note and never came back." The world tilted. Rachel stood again, more composed now but visibly altered. "We might be related," she said. "You and me." The weight of those words landed like thunder in Lily's chest. She didn't know what to feel. She only knew one thing for certain. Whatever this was, it was bigger than a gift, bigger than a music box, bigger than one girl trying to make her mother smile. Rachel's arrival hadn't just changed her afternoon. It had blown open the vault of a past that someone had locked tight. And now, the truth was clawing its way into the light. Rachel Zegler had lived in the public eye long enough to know when to wear a mask, when to flash a camera-ready smile, and when to steer the conversation to safer ground. But as she stood in the center of Marigold Lane holding a music box that seemed to hum with the pulse of her own childhood, she felt that facade begin to crack. This wasn't a PR stunt or a promotional event. This was a vortex, pulling her into a mystery she hadn't even realized was hers. Her assistant was now nervously pacing by the boutique entrance, clearly aware they were going off script. But Rachel's attention was locked entirely on Lily and the name that had come out of her mouth. Angela Vargas. It had been years since Rachel had heard that name spoken aloud. It lived in whispers at family gatherings, in fragmented stories traded behind closed doors. Angela had vanished in the late 80s, just after Rachel's father was born, and had never been heard from again. Some in the family said she ran off with a lover. Others said she'd had a mental breakdown. But the truth had never been clear. Rachel remembered the sadness in her grandmother's eyes every time someone brought up Angela's name, the way she changed the subject or claimed to have forgotten. It was one of those family ghosts people stop chasing because it hurts too much to admit how little you ever knew them. Now here stood Lily, eyes wide, clutching a music box passed down like a secret between generations. And she wasn't just connected to Angela. She might be her granddaughter. The idea sent a chill up Rachel's spine. "We need to talk," she said firmly, not to Lily, but to Mr. Dalton. The old man gave a slow nod and gestured to the back room. A modest office lined with ledgers, invoices, and faded photographs that seemed to lean under the weight of time. Rachel followed him in, with Lily hesitating before trailing behind. Once the door closed, the air seemed to shift again, thicker, heavier with something unspoken. "Tell me what you know," Rachel said. "About this box. About Angela Vargas." Mr. Dalton didn't sit. He moved to a shelf behind the desk and pulled out a small, leather-bound photo album with cracked corners and the scent of old paper. He opened it slowly, flipping through pages of black and white portraits and handwritten dates until he stopped on a picture that made Rachel's breath catch. It was Angela, unmistakably young, vibrant, standing next to a carousel with a child in her arms and the very same music box resting on a bench beside her. "That was taken right before she disappeared," Dalton said quietly. She came in often, not to buy but to leave things, notes, tokens. I think she knew she was being watched. One day she asked if I could hold onto something for safekeeping. That music box. She said she'd come back for it. She never did. Rachel stared at the photo like it might come to life. Why didn't anyone say anything? Dalton hesitated. Because she asked me not to. She said if anyone ever came for it, someone who mentioned her name, someone who looked like her, I'd know it was time. Lily looked down at the box in her lap, her hands suddenly feeling like they were holding something radioactive. My mom never talks about her. She always said her mother left them, never came back. She doesn't even have a photo. Dalton gave a faint nod. Because she probably thought it was safer that way. Angela was scared. She wasn't just leaving a marriage. She was leaving something darker. Something that made her believe disappearing was the only way to protect her daughter. Rachel's pulse quickened. She remembered an old family rumor, that Angela had been involved with someone dangerous, someone who had ties to underground dealings. The whispers were always vague, discredited by the older relatives as paranoia. But now, faced with this box, this photo, and this child, it all felt horrifyingly real. You think she was running? Rachel asked. Dalton looked her square in the eyes. I think she was hiding, and I think she left clues for someone brave enough to come looking. Lily sat frozen, the pieces clicking together in her head like falling dominoes. That means my mom. She might have never known the truth. She thought she was abandoned. Rachel's voice cracked as she sat down beside her. Or maybe she was protected. Either way, she deserves to know. There was a long pause, one that filled the room like fog. Then, as if summoned by fate, the boutique doorbell rang again. A woman's voice called out from the front room, breathless and unfamiliar. Lily? Are you in here? Lily jumped up, rushing to the door, her heart thudding as she pushed it open. Standing there, wind-blown and flushed, was her mother, Maria. Confused, wary, her eyes scanning the boutique like a mother bear looking for threats. She locked eyes with Rachel, and something passed between them. A flicker of memory, recognition, or just the jolt of seeing a stranger in a moment of vulnerability. What's going on? Maria demanded. Why did you leave school early, Lily? Before the girl could answer, Rachel stepped forward. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we need to talk. About your mother, Angela. Maria paled. Her knees almost buckled. Who told you that name? She whispered. Mr. Dalton quietly stepped out from behind the counter and closed the boutique door, flipping the sign to closed. Rachel didn't speak. She simply reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the photo Dalton had shown them, and handed it to Maria. The woman stared at it in stunned silence, her fingers trembling. This was taken just before she vanished, Rachel said softly. Your daughter found her way here. She saved every cent to buy the box in that photo. And somehow, the universe led us all here. Maria finally sat, her hand covering her mouth. For the first time in years, she wasn't the strong one. She wasn't the provider or the protector. She was a daughter staring into a portal of answers she never thought she'd receive. I thought she left me, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. I thought she just left. Rachel sat beside her. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she was trying to save you. Maybe she's been waiting for this day longer than any of us realized. In the quiet that followed, the music box began to play again. No one had touched it. The melody floated gently through the boutique like a lullaby from the past. And in that moment, none of them spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the song said it all. The boutique's stillness, which had previously felt sacred and soothing, now pressed down on everyone like a weight. Maria stared at the photo in her hands, her fingers trembling around its edges, as though afraid the image might vanish if she blinked. The photo of her mother, Angela Vargas, standing in a snapshot of youth, surrounded by whispers of a life Maria had never known, seemed to rattle loose every belief she had anchored her identity to. Rachel, sitting beside her with a gentleness that clashed with the celebrity persona Maria had seen on television, said nothing more. There were no words left that could prepare someone for the moment they discover their mother didn't abandon them out of selfishness, but out of fear. The music box rested on the counter between them, an unassuming object suddenly heavy with generations of sorrow, silence, and secrets. Lily stood near the door, caught in the eye of a storm she had unintentionally summoned. For months she had poured herself into saving for a gift, hoping to bring joy to her mother's weary eyes. And now that very act had cracked open a sealed vault of history, pain, and confusion. Rachel's assistant lingered quietly near the door, phone in hand, silently fielding messages from a manager desperate to know where Rachel had disappeared to. But she didn't interrupt. Rachel reached into her coat again and this time pulled out a second photograph, one her own grandmother had kept locked in a drawer. In it, Angela stood at a distance, barely more than a shadow behind a tree during a family picnic. Her face turned slightly toward the camera as if unsure whether she was allowed to be there. Rachel handed it to Maria, who took it with shaking hands. "She was watching?" Maria asked. "All this time?" Rachel nodded slowly. "I think she wanted to make sure you were okay, but someone kept her from coming back." Maria's face tightened. "My father." The name landed like a crack of thunder. Rachel stiffened. "Your father? Was his name Enrique Vargas?" Maria nodded. "He wasn't just strict. He was dangerous. He controlled everything, our money, our home, our lives. He made my mother feel small. She was afraid of him." Rachel's breath caught. "He was my grandfather. And my father, he never talked about him much. Just said he died bitter and alone." The pieces clicked together in that moment with such sharp finality that both women flinched. They weren't just linked by the woman in the photo. They were family through blood, through pain, through the unspoken trauma of generations. Mr. Dalton returned from the back room with a folder. "There's more," he said quietly. Inside were notes Angela had left with the music box years ago. Cryptic messages scribbled on torn receipts and old envelopes. One read, "Tell her the music means I never stopped singing." Another simply said, "I chose vanishing over violence." As Maria read each note, her tears came freely now, no longer restrained by dignity or disbelief. But then, something else happened, something unexpected. The boutique door flew open with a crash, the wind sweeping in a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a presence that immediately froze the room. Rachel's assistant instinctively stepped between him and the others. Maria stood, pale and stunned. "Eduardo?" she whispered. He was her uncle, her father's brother. The one who had quietly handled the estate when Enrique died. The one who had always claimed ignorance about Angela's disappearance. "You shouldn't be here," Eduardo growled. His eyes locked on the music box, then on Rachel, then Lily. "That box was never supposed to resurface." Rachel stood slowly. "You knew." Eduardo didn't deny it. "We protected the family name. Angela had problems. She was terrified." Maria cut in, her voice trembling but strong. "She ran from your brother, from my father, and you helped bury the truth." Eduardo's jaw tightened. "It wasn't your business to dig up." Lily took a step forward then, her voice steady despite her youth. "It was mine. It was all mine." Her innocence cut through the room like a blade. Eduardo scoffed. "You think the world wants this story? You think people want to know what really happened? She was unstable. She would have brought shame to all of us." Rachel stepped closer, her voice cold as glass. "The only shame is how long this family silenced her." Her voice carried a force that startled even Maria. Rachel was no longer the girl from the red carpet. She was a woman standing on the ruins of buried truth, and she refused to let it stay buried. Eduardo tried to take the music box, but Mr. Dalton stepped between them. "She left it here for the right hands, and they're here now." Eduardo's face twisted in frustration, then rage. "You're all going to regret this." He stormed out without another word, the bell above the door slamming back and forth behind him like an alarm. No one moved for a moment. Then Maria sat back down, this time with a different weight to her posture. Not the burden of grief, but the release of it. "My mother didn't leave me," she whispered. She was taken from me by fear. Rachel reached across the table and took her hand. And you gave Lily a life she didn't have. You broke the cycle. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Someone had recognized Rachel through the boutique window and posted it online. Phones were recording, and the whisper of scandal loomed. But Rachel didn't care. She turned to her assistant. Call my publicist. Tell her the truth's coming out. Every word. The assistant hesitated. Are you sure? This could affect your career. Rachel's eyes locked on Lily. If telling the truth ruins my career, then I don't want it. The music box began to play once more, this time without anyone touching it, as if Angela herself was finally singing again. And for the first time in years, the song didn't sound like a memory. It sounded like hope. The story should have ended with Eduardo's retreat, but the real conclusion unfurled in quieter moments, like petals opening to light after a storm has passed. The boutique, once a stage for confrontation and truth-telling, slowly returned to its usual stillness, but the air no longer felt stagnant. It vibrated with renewal. Rachel, Maria, and Lily sat in a triangle of understanding that didn't need more words. Some truths are louder in silence. Mr. Dalton had returned the music box to Lily's hands, but it no longer felt like a purchase. It felt like a birthright, one that spanned bloodlines and heartbreak. Maria held the old notes her mother had left, reading and rereading them like they were verses of scripture. There was one in particular that clung to her heart. I never stopped singing for you. That line looped in her mind as they stepped out of the boutique into a world that had kept turning, oblivious to the family epic that had just unfolded inside. The sky was overcast now, and the pavement shimmered with the remnants of an earlier rain, reflecting their faces in warped puddles like ghosts made visible. Rachel's assistant held the car door open, but Rachel paused. She didn't want to go back to movie sets, premieres, or interviews, not yet. She wanted to walk the neighborhood, see the park Angela once strolled through, smell the same air her great-aunt once did. Lily slipped her hand into Maria's, and for the first time in months, Maria looked at her daughter not just with pride, but with awe. That night, Maria placed the music box at the center of their small kitchen table. They didn't speak much over dinner, all three too exhausted by the weight of everything, but the box was there, like a quiet guardian of legacy. When it was time for bed, Lily wound it gently, letting the lullaby echo through the apartment as she drifted off beside her mom. Rachel, meanwhile, sat in her hotel room downtown, her press team already scrambling to contain rumors from the boutique confrontation. TMZ had a blurry photo. Twitter was speculating wildly, but she ignored the calls, the texts, the mounting pressure. Instead, she stared at the photograph of Angela holding a baby in front of that carousel. The same photo that now felt like a key to a locked door in her heart. She thought about what it meant to have a platform, to have a voice when others were silenced. The next morning, she walked into a local news studio unannounced and told the receptionist she wanted to give an exclusive. Not about a film, not about fashion, but about Angela Vargas, the woman who had been erased by fear, whose legacy had quietly endured through the strength of her daughter and the courage of her granddaughter. The story aired that evening. Rachel didn't dramatize it. She simply told the truth. About domestic abuse. About generational trauma. About how family history can be rewritten not with vengeance but with compassion. Clips from the interview went viral. Survivors of abuse wrote in from around the country, saying Angela's story felt like their own. Others shared pictures of long-lost family heirlooms, music boxes among them, hoping they too might be part of some greater forgotten story. Rachel's PR team braced for backlash, but none came. Instead, she received invitations to speak at women's shelters, advocacy events, and fundraisers. Maria and Lily watched it all unfold from their couch, clutching each other in disbelief. It was Lily who said it first. It's like she gave us a new song to live by. Maria smiled. No, you did. Weeks passed. Marigold Lane became a minor pilgrimage site, not for its merchandise, but for what it represented. A place where past and present collided, where ghosts found peace. Mr. Dalton quietly retired not long after, leaving behind a sealed envelope addressed to Lily. Inside was a faded letter, written in Angela's own looping cursive. To the girl who will carry my name farther than I ever could. I see you. I believe in you. You are not forgotten. Lily framed it and placed it beside the music box, which now lived on a bookshelf beside her bed. Every night, she played it once before falling asleep. Not because it made her feel sad, but because it made her feel whole. Rachel visited them often in the weeks that followed, never as a celebrity, but as something rarer. A cousin, a protector, a bridge between two fractured family trees. She brought books for Lily, groceries for Maria, and questions that led to long, winding conversations on Sunday afternoons. In time, Maria found the courage to speak publicly, too. She joined Rachel on a podcast where they told their intertwined story in full. The silences, the wounds, the rediscovered hope. The hosts cried. The listeners cried. But the takeaway wasn't sorrow, it was survival. Redemption. The music box became symbolic, referenced in articles and TED Talks, even featured in a short film Rachel co-produced called The Echo. It told Angela's story not as a tragedy, but as a victory waiting decades to be claimed. Lily was cast as the young girl in the film, not because she was an actress but because she was the story. On set, she wore a dress her mother had once sewn by hand, and as the camera rolled, she turned the crank of a replica music box with such conviction that the crew stood in stunned silence. One night, months later, Rachel hosted a dinner for both families, hers and Maria's, finally united after decades of silence. It was awkward at first, the way healing often is, but somewhere between the laughter and the shared stories, they realized the same truth, that even broken roots can nourish something beautiful. Rachel stood to give a toast. To the ones who sing even when no one's listening, she said, raising her glass. To the ones who leave behind music instead of goodbyes. Lily beamed, her mother beside her, and somewhere in the background, the familiar melody of Clair de Lune drifted in. Not from the box this time, but from a live string quartet Rachel had surprised them with. As the notes filled the air, Lily felt her heart expand in ways she couldn't explain. She had set out to buy a gift. What she found instead was a history reclaimed, a family reborn, and a truth so powerful it echoed louder than any lullaby. And long after the night faded into memory, the song would remain, not just in a music box, but in every choice they made from that day forward.